It's spooky season, bitches. It's spooky season, bitches. Much better. I wore my alien shirt especially for this video because I didn't know that I was going to be doing any more alien content. And you know, you can't even see it. So that's pleasant. Hello friends and weary travellers. Oh, for God's sake, the dog. Today I'm going to be sharing with you some of my favourite horror films, and that is because during spooky season we are going to be watching a lot of horror films and, you know, consuming a lot of horror content, and as such I would like to give you an idea of what I like. And a lot of you might think it's trash and that's fine. I'm by no means saying that these films are, you know, the pinnacle of the horror genre. I'm saying some of them are. I am 100% saying that some of them are the pinnacle of the horror genre. However, I'm not saying all of them are, and I do understand that a few of them nostalgia plays into it, and some of them are trash 100%, and I like them anyway. If you're looking for some serious recommendations, I am seriously recommending them to you, but they are by no means serious. You know, all this, I don't know. Shut up, okay? Shut up. I don't know what I'm talking about. I've put these films into a vague order. Like, I made a list of 13 films that I liked, and then I kind of arranged them in a nonsensical way into an order that I liked. And that is the order in which I will present them to you, and I will go from number 13 to number 1 because that is the most exciting. So let's get straight into it. I'm going to start with the 2003 film Identity. You know, the one with the handprint on the cover with the little people as the fingers. Very creative. Favorite genre within a genre, if you will. Within the horror genre, I love a psychological thriller. I love the stuff that plays with your head as opposed to, like, you know, slasher or gore. I like a film to keep you guessing all the way through, like a film to have something to talk about when you finish, because to watch a film is a social thing. No? Is that my Gemini rising talking? So I don't just like Identity because it kind of fits into this category. I like Identity because a lot of reasons. It's got two storylines all the way through that you don't know how they intersect. At one point there's a really good misdirect where you think that that's how they intersect, but then it turns out it's not. You're kind of left wondering, okay, but what the fuck does this other storyline have to do with anything? And then obviously at the end you find out. I think that this twist and the other twists that happen throughout the film are very effective. They're all accompanied by this very moody, almost film noir feel. This like ex-cop who's like kind of arguably the main character. He makes the whole thing seem like a murder mystery. And there is almost a supernatural element. And in the back of your mind, you're always wondering, okay, is this something else? Like, is this not a guy? Like, what's going on? I really like the opening. It's got all these quick, like, Danny Boyle-esque cuts. You know, not to get all filmic on you or whatever. He did it, and he was, like, inspired by somebody else. It might have been, like, George A. Romero or Brian De Palma, maybe. But either way, when I see these quick cuts, I think of Danny Boyle. And at the beginning, all these people show up to this motel, and as they show up, the timeline skips back, and you see how they ended up here. And it all happens very fast, and you get all of the exposition that you need in a very short amount of time, and I think it's very effective. And I like that because you don't want a lot of dragging exposition, because ideally your horror film is going to be an hour and a half long. I'm sorry, that's just the way it works. If your horror film is more than an hour and a half long, it's going to have to be very, very good for me to have not wasted, but spent that time on it. I would give this movie personally a 6 out of 10 because I think now looking back on it, it is a bit cheesy, and also I understand how the film itself could be viewed as pretty problematic, you know, for what it was at the time, and, you know, for the horror that it does present. A solid 6 out of 10 for me. One of the first psychological thrillers that I watched and that really made me think and really surprised me, because, you know, even in the year 2003 I was clearly a seasoned horror connoisseur. At number 12, I have placed Paranormal Activity 3. I wouldn't normally single out a movie in a series like this. I feel like Paranormal Activity is one of those series that really did go down the toilet beyond salvation. And so the back end of the series I fully reject. I cast it out like the demon that it is. Paranormal Activity 3 is the best of the series, in my opinion. I don't know whether that is a popular opinion or not, and I don't really care. The first 3 films, in my opinion, are really, really great. I think the third one is the best one, first of all, because it explores the backstory of the 2 girls from the first films and explains, you know, how they ended up getting haunted in the first place. And I always love an origin story. And Katie is shaping up to be quite the supernatural hero in these films, I think. This is also the scariest film for me because the main protagonists of the film are kids, and the main targets of the demons in the film are kids, and you always feel more scared for children because they're obviously more defenseless. And I don't know whether this is like true in real life, but in films they're always a lot more accepting of any ghost activity and they just let it slide. They're just like, okay, that just happened, really question it. And so obviously with that logic, it's a lot more easy for a demon or a ghost or whatever to take hold of them and take advantage of them or whatever. So it's just a lot scarier to see a kid in that situation. The scariest scene in Paranormal Activity for me is the scene in the bathroom with the dude babysitter. I'm not going to say the name of the ritual that they do because there's a mirror right there and I'm superstitious as all hell. But y'all know what it is. That scene, oh my god, you don't understand. Does anybody remember that episode of Supernatural that also covered this urban legend? That episode, for some reason, gave me nightmares, and I have just never recovered from that, and anything involving this urban legend now freaks me the hell out, yeah? But I cannot stop consuming media that contains it. Think what you will of me. When I saw in the trailer that this ritual was going to be a part of the film, I knew that it was going to fucking terrify me. And it did. It's still the scariest scene in the film for me. All the furniture in the room next door starts like flying around. And it's like, wow, you just really didn't need to do that, bro. Like, of all the games that you could have chosen to play with a child, why that one? Why? Why would anybody play that game? Why would you play that game? Why would you play that game? Help me, God. Okay. The scariest scene, in my opinion, is not the best scene. Just because it terrified me uniquely does not mean that it was, you know, particularly well put together. Just so happened to prey upon my darkest fears. You know, nothing serious scene, in my opinion, is female babysitter comes over and the girls have gone to bed and she's sitting at the table doing her homework. The girls have been messing around with a bed sheet earlier and underneath it and pretending to be a ghost. There's this brilliant technique used by the director here where the guy in the film mounts the camera on the base of you know, a fan that rotates, and so the camera films the kitchen half of the room over here and then the dining room over here. When you see something going over here and there's that delay, you're like dreading when it goes back over. It's like a really good way to make tension. I can understand how other people might find it tedious, but I thought it was so frightening. Anyway, this babysitter's sitting there and on the other side of the kitchen, the camera sees a kid under the sheet and you're like, oh, one of the kids has come to scare the babysitter, it's fine. Pan back over to the babysitter, she's doing her work. She has no idea what's going on, what's about to happen. She's got her AirPods in. The camera pans back over. Kid in the sheet is gone. Okay, pans back over to the babysitter and kid in the sheet is standing menacingly behind the babysitter. The babysitter turns around and the bed sheet just drops and there was nothing under the fucking bed sheet, and it was like, oh my god. This ghost really just be here to fuck with us right now. Wow. It never ceases to amaze me the creative ways that these ghosts come up with to just uniquely terrify us, the audience, as opposed to literally anybody else. Stand there randomly finding a sheet behind you is probably a little bit confusing and a little bit unsettling, but I wouldn't necessarily be terrified for my life. I'd just be like, oh, a sheet. 7 out of 10 is a fair estimation for this film. I think if somebody really enjoyed the franchise as a whole up until this point, it's still a good watch. It's not the last good one per se, but I think it was the last one that upheld the integrity of the series in a way, if you get me. The Mark ones was pretty good, but that's kind of a spin-off, not a sequel. The Ghost Dimension didn't really explain anything to me, but I enjoyed it, I guess. It wasn't as scary as the first three though, still, and that's why Paranormal Activity 3 gets my number 12 spot on this list, and none of the others are on here. Number 11 is The Invitation from 2015. I am not going to say anything about this one. If you were going to go and watch it, I want you to go in completely blind, because that is the way that I went in. I can't even remember how I ended up coming across this film in the first place, but I watched it. I was so filled with anxiety the entire way through. It was great. I really had no idea which way it was gonna go the whole way through. And then it ended, the climax happened, and it was great. And then the ending happened, and I was like, I was fighting for my life. I was shook. That was the only way I can describe it. I was shaken to my very core. It was really, really good. I would give it a 9 out of 10. I haven't watched it since, and that alone should give you an idea of how good it was that it's even made it onto this list and that I remember it after like 3 years or something like that. It was amazingly good. I would like to give it a second watch and see if it kind of holds up once you know everything that's going to happen. There's a mystery to the film, and I think that when you're not feeling that anxiety that you don't know what's going to happen, maybe it won't be as good. The characters in it were really interesting, and I was really rooting for the main guy, but I didn't trust him at the same time. He was like this really unreliable narrator. I think that it would hold up on a second viewing. I would like to say that with confidence. I would give it a 9 out of 10. Number 10 is Gingersnaps. I love this film. There's not really any particular reason why. I mean, it is like shot great, and I think the storyline's really great, and I think the characters are really great. So there's some reasons. There's no structured reasons I can really give you. You know how well, not every, you know how every goth girl watched The Craft when she was younger and like idolized the characters from The Craft? I never watched it. I didn't know what the hell it was. I still have never watched it, and I think for me, instead of having The Craft, I had Gingersnaps, because the over-the-top goth girls in this were like my idols. I don't know what it says about me that Ginger is one of my childhood feminist icons, but she was all I had to work with in the mire-ish wasteland that was the early 2000s, okay? I think the film is so quotable. I think it's got some of the best lines ever. My personal favourite line is, I think it's the first line that Ginger says in the entire film. She's sitting there with, you know, a big kitchen knife, and she's just sizing up her arm, you know, as you do, as a goth girl. And she just goes, "Wrists are for girls. I'm slitting my throat." And I think that's just classic. I don't know. Maybe I was a weird kid. I don't know. I would give this a solid 6 out of 10 though. I would say that it's very slept on. One of the best werewolf movies of all time. I like werewolves, you know. I'm not gonna lie, like, I enjoy the idea of werewolves a lot, and I think that there isn't enough werewolf media out there. I have consumed it at a very high rate. There are 2 werewolf films on this list. I don't know whether they're very popular werewolf films, but this is one of them, and this was Gingersnaps, and I gave it a 6 out of 10. Find me a werewolf movie, please. Thank you. And number 9 is Dead Silence. I'm pretty sure it's one of James Wan's first films. I think he brought Saw out before this. For me, I love a lot of his films. The Conjuring is like definitely an honourable mention here. But I think that Dead Silence is always going to be one of my favourite. Something that I really like about it, which contradicts in a way something I said earlier, is that it's so simple. It's a straightforward story. There's not a lot of complicated twists and turns in it, and you don't really have to, you know, understand film or understand the genre to get it and enjoy it, but it's still really scary and really effective, and I think he does a lot with, you know, the little that was there. A lot of the enjoyment in this for me was that it was genuinely scary. It was a moody murder mystery with puppets. And I thought that was great. Whereas Identity made it a moody murder mystery, in my opinion, by, you know, juxtaposing the darkness of the empty highways outside with the harsh yellows and reds and greens of the lights in the motel. This one makes it a moody murder mystery by just, you know, turning up the blue filter. It's, you know, essentially kind of what Twilight did as well. Why do I bring up Twilight so much? I feel like I watch too much Twilight content on the internet because there is always a surplus of Twilight content. Do you not find? Everybody always wants to watch things about Twilight. No. Maybe I should do Twilight. I'm not doing Twilight. Fuck off, I'm not doing Twilight. I already did the host, what more do you want from me? I'm gonna explain the plot of this one a little bit. I think you deserve it. So Jamie's just got married, or is about to get married to this girl, and she's pregnant but he doesn't know it. They get a knock on the door and it's just a parcel, and inside this parcel is a ventriloquist dummy. Jamie goes out to get his bird some Chinese food, and while he's gone, the puppet essentially like kills his girlfriend. Like, I'm not gonna lie to you. Jamie is kind of like the #1 suspect in the police investigation because obviously they're not going to believe that a puppet killed his wife. Jamie, while he's not officially arrested yet, goes back to his hometown to arrange her funeral and also to find out what happened to her because he, you know, suspects whoever sent the puppet. I'm not going to give anything more away than that. I remember my first watch of this. No, I'm pretty sure it was on like Film 4 or something. Like, me and my mum just decided to watch it while we were having an Indian, you know, as you do. This first scene had us both like that, like the puppet turning up. I just think the scene was really well put together and it set the tone of the film really well. The scariest scene for me in this film is there's a scene, yeah, where there's a guy who works at the morgue. I'm pretty sure his name is Henry. He's like going back in his memory to when this old woman, who is the antagonist of the film, we later find out, he's going back to when she died. And when she died, she was a ventriloquist and she wanted to be made into a puppet and be buried with all of her dolls. Very weird, very urban legend. I love it. It's come from a very twisted mind and I love that as well. When he was a kid and his father was the guy who worked in the morgue, the undertaker or whatever, Henry, snuck down into the morgue when this woman's body was in there. He like goes up to the coffin and like accidentally tips it over on top of him and it's so awful. And then he looks up and she's stood in the corner and it's like, oh my God, help me. This scene was horrifying. It really was, and I think about it some nights. Horror films with morgues, go. And not Morgs the YouTuber, because any of his videos are horror films. I think my personal favourite scene is when we see a recollection of one of this woman's performances. You know, she's on stage with the puppet that killed that guy's girlfriend earlier, you know? And some kid is like, oh, I can see lips moving. And then her and this dummy are like having an argument and clearly speaking over the top of each other. And it's a really impressive performance if she's the one doing it and the puppet is not in fact alive or possessed by a spirit or something. But it's a very creepy scene. And at the end of it, the boy's sitting there like, oh shit, like, I feel kind of like a prick now for heckling this woman. And she turns around to him and she says, now, who's the dummy? I just think it's really badass. It has got an unexpected twist at the end of this film. I'm not going to reveal it here because, you know, you might want to go and watch it or whatever, but I can see how some people might find the twist kind of stupid. But I enjoyed it for what it was, and it didn't like ruin the rest of the film for me, so whatever. I give this, you know, a solid 6 out of 10. It's a cute classic. Also, like, I just want to talk about like the score. Like, I love the main theme for this. So yeah. I think the score for this film and the main theme for it is really beautiful and really haunting. The sound of a horror film is always really important. So that's good. I really tried to commit to a long ass video when I can't even commit to someone on Sims. I'm like, yeah, but that generate over the road decided to speak to me of his own free will and I had to physically click on you and make you interact with me. Like, how do you think that makes me feel? I know we made this account to live the life we'll never have as millennials, Jacob, but I just don't know how I feel about this right now. Number 8 is Jennifer's Body. This is an iconic feminist film, and I missed out on seeing it as a young girl, not because of the horrific advertising, which is something I could go into right now, but I kind of won't, but because My friend and I tried to see it when we were, I believe, 13, and the film is a 15, I'm pretty sure. The girl at the desk asked my friend when her birthday was, and she told her the truth. So yeah, we couldn't go to the cinema that day. So we only got to watch Jennifer's Body when I was in college, and I felt like I'd really missed out. There's a lot of representation here of the toxic female friendships that we all experience when we're younger. Not a lot of them end up with your friend getting possessed by a demon, but you know, sometimes it can feel like it. I like the diverse males that we get in this. I like that, you know, Jen isn't always going after Chad Thundercock. She does in the beginning, but then, you know, there's like the sad uwu emo boy, and then there's also, you know, Needy's girlfriend, and they're all guys that Needy was involved with, which, you know, goes back to this whole toxic female friendship thing that I was talking about, where like Jennifer, even though she's the more conventionally attractive one and the one that guys are more naturally going for, as we see in the beginning, she still feels jealous of Needy and feels the need to compete with her on some level. Even when she's possessed by a demon. Those female emotions, they just be feeding right into those demons' plans. This is another one that's really quotable for me. I can see your front butt. One of the more cringy ones for me, but it's one that just sprung to mind. All of the cringy ones are coming to mind now. Like, remember that bit where she's like, oh my god, I don't even want to say it, but I'm going to. Oh my god, you give me such a wetty. Dying on the floor, crawling to the phone to call 999. My hand reaches out and I just about grasp the cord of the landline, which we still have in this house, you know. But you know, I am gone. I'm gone. I really love the original song from this as well. I think it's a fucking bop, you know, Through the Trees by Low Shoulder, the band who sacrificed a young girl for fame. Glory. There aren't necessarily any scary scenes in Jennifer's Body. It's not really there to scare you, although there is a lot of suspense in some of the scenes. There's also a lot of sexual tension in some of the scenes, which is, you know, a strange balance to have in a horror film, but we move. And the best scene for me, I like the sacrifice scene with Jennifer. Not because I enjoy the gratuitous, you know, murder of a young girl, because actually it's not kind of viewed as the gratuitous murder of a young girl. We don't see the attack from the guy's perspective, we see it from Jennifer's. So there's like, you know, an authenticity to, you know, victims in this sense, and we're keeping it lighthearted, so we're moving along. I also like the end credit scene because it wraps up the little mystery about the Devil's Kettle waterfall, where, you know, you throw stuff in and they don't know where it comes out. But also, Needy goes to get revenge on the guys who did that to Jen, because even though Jen turned into this evil demon, that's not who she was, and she was still Needy's friend, and Needy gets the revenge that she so deserved. It's great. I'll give this a solid 7 out of 10. It's iconic. It's the only horror film I've ever seen, really, that's got that girly feel to it. Like, I feel like, you know, as a woman, when a film is made for you, and this is just one of those. I think that horror films do view things from a female perspective a lot of the time, and that's why we like them so much. But I think that there's a difference between, you know, a female perspective and like a girly perspective, you get me? So, you know, chew on that. There's now a plane, there's now a plane. Ooh, let's harmonize with the plane, guys. Ooh, let's not do that anymore. Oh my god, I've got to do the night shift soon. I've got to do the night shift soon. But we're moving on to number 7, which is Chronicle. I debated with myself whether this could count as a horror film. It plays out in itself more as almost like a superhero origins film. Found footage, which is the way that this film is shot, is like a horror staple, and you don't really see it in a lot of other genres, so I think that that's what kind of makes it more of a horror for me. And I think that it does have a lot of other horror staples as well, and it is horrifying. You know, we're keeping it, and I'm allowed, because I don't really know what other genre I would put this into. I feel like this one deserves a little bit of a backstory as well, because you might not have seen it. It's about like a guy called Andrew. He's a little bit of a loner. He's kind of getting beat up by his dad, and he, you know, he's a very sympathetic young child. He's a teenager, but he's so, it's Dane DeHaan. He's so small and soft looking. It's really upsetting for me to watch this. Anyway. Andrew, his cousin invites him to a party, and while they're there, he and his cousin go with this like popular kid at school, and they go to investigate this weird thing in the woods, and while they're there, they get telekinetic powers, and the film follows their journey through discovering these powers and like learning what they can do with it. We fucking stan Andrew, like, and you know, spoilers fully, so you know, skip if you're thinking that this sounds like your kind of thing. Andrew kind of turns out to be the villain in this story, but he's a really sympathetic villain because we see where he comes from here. And obviously I said that this plays out as a superhero origin story, and you might have thought that when I said he was the main character that it was his superhero origin story, but no, he is in fact the supervillain and his cousin is the superhero, and they have to like fight it out at the end. And it's so horrific for me. It's such a, you hate to see it, you really do. And it is really epic, so like Dragon Ball Z-esque, they're like full on throwing buses at each other and shit, but it's sad for me. And I really just love a tragic hero, and Andrew just really does it for me because we see his slow descent into madness. This film really has a lot more humour than a lot of the other films on this list, but I want to talk here about why humour is so important in horror and why the ramped up humour in this film doesn't necessarily exclude it from a horror list. The real horror in any film, I think we can all agree, isn't in like jump scares or in the effects that are used, or even in like what the antagonist looks like or what they do. It's all about the building up of tension, of the not knowing what's going to happen next. You can relieve that tension in a lot of ways. You can relieve it with like a fake scare or a real scare, I guess. And you can also relieve it with a moment of like poignancy, like sadness, like something can happen character-wise. One of the most effective things to relieve that tension so that you can ramp it back up again is humour. Because obviously if you laugh, then it's kind of the opposite of being scared, you know? I really think that horror is sometimes, not always, but it's a fun genre, and I think that a lot of the times when I go into a horror film I want to have fun watching it and to enjoy it and like, you know, have it be a romp. I don't think that's too much to ask. So for me, when horror is mixed in well with humour, I really like that. There is a lot of humour in this film. In fact, my favourite scene in the entire film is the scene where the boys are kind of just getting to know what they can do with their powers, and they go to the supermarket and a lot of hijinks ensue. And there's this like scene outside, I'll give you an example, where they move a woman's car that she just parked, and when she comes out of the store she obviously can't find her car because it's in a completely different spot, and these guys just think that's fucking hilarious, and I think that that is fucking hilarious. I really do love Dane DeHaan as an actor, and I think that he plays these tragic heroes really well. I think he did a really good job of the Green Goblin when he did that, and I feel like I've talked about this before, so I'm gonna stop. Honourable mention right now, I think A Cure for Wellness. I suppose it does count as a horror film. It didn't really make it onto my favourites list, but I do really enjoy watching it because I really love the aesthetic of the film and the way it's shot. It is really interesting, and I think Dane did a really good job there at playing a character that he wasn't really used to. I've gone off on a tangent here again, haven't I? I don't know. I just think Dane DeHaan's a really good actor. They also use these telekinetic abilities in a clever way to get some, you know, camera shots of all the guys, because they actually learn how to use their powers to do several things at once. Dane DeHaan's character Andrew uses his to use the camera while he's off doing other things. So, you know, you can get these shots of all of them and it still be canon with the found footage. Ting. I'll give this an 8 out of 10. For real, for real. I am the apex predator. Pretend I've just obliterated my bookcase.